Welcome to the
Club Dub Football Podcast,
where the only question is,
does your team make it into the club?
Can he get in? No, he cannot!
Welcome everyone to the Club Dub Football Podcast. It's time for the recap show. All the stories, action and misadventure from the weekend's games all crammed into one great bite-sized spectacle. The guys are ready, so let's jump right in.
So hi there, JB.
Hi there, Rob Rose.
It's time to share our big news with the people, although if you've clicked and started listening, you may be certain steps ahead of what I'm about to describe. So for the last year or so, you have hopefully been listening to our pod and enjoying ultimately the Club Dub Football Podcast a couple of days before the slate of NFL games, where you listen to us talk through the NFL's big storylines and pick the winner from our game of the week, namely the team that we put into Club Dub. And that format has been basically delivering us a pretty roaring trade, JB. And now, in a gift to the listening public, we're going to double the fun, because as well as picking games going into the weekend, we're launching a new recap show coming out of the NFL weekend, where we will talk you through everything you've missed and pick up on the big NFL storylines that you would want to hear us talk about. So this is exciting, JB. So exciting that PB and Aldrin can't be with us. Aldrin on the other side of the world, jet setting, so we'll probably let him off for that, and PB missing for 1 week only. But it means you and I get to ultimately talk about the things that we want to talk about while also trying to put on a show. I'm feeling there's no harm in that. I don't know about you.
No, I'm looking forward to it. I do feel that we should clarify, just for all of the Aldrin maniacs out there, that he is also only missing for 1 week only. The both of them will be back this time next week. So don't worry, you will still get your fix of James Aldrin.
Well, Phil will be back as of Thursday. But yeah, Aldrin missing for 1 week only. So let's roll ourselves through the inaugural, we can call it that, can't we? The inaugural recap show for the Club Dub Football Podcast. And let's start by going through the week's games. And with it having been a big week with Thanksgiving and all of that across the pond, some of the games I'm about to recap feel an awful long time ago. 3 of them from Thursday. So let's start with those Thanksgiving games. The Detroit Lions, the staple of the Thanksgiving fixture list, well, ultimately continued with what has been a pretty down and problematic year, arguably with one of their poorest performances, dare I say it, in a 14-16 home loss to the Chicago Bears. A field goal as time expired was ultimately the final nail in the coffin. But it did actually lead to, I don't know if you heard this, JB, on the telecast, one of Joe Buck's best ever pieces of commentary, I felt. Did you hear it?
No, I don't know.
So as the final field goal went over, Joe Buck went, "Good snap, good hold, good kick, good night." And that was it. And I thought that was brilliant. So congratulations to Joe Buck for really adding something to what was a pretty dour Thanksgiving fixture otherwise. I'm not really rolling through these scores very quickly here, am I? So yeah, Lions 14, Bears 16. So the Bills returned to their early season dominant form with a 31-6 win over the Saints. The Raiders are off the schneid. A 3-game losing streak ended in Dallas, of all places, with a really exciting, probably the game of the week for me, 36-33 win over the Cowboys. Then when we get to Sunday's games, well, it was a massacre, really. The Bengals 41. The Steelers 10, and it wasn't looking as rosy as being 10 points for quite a long stretch of that game. But yeah, 41-10. The biggest defeat for the Steelers in, JB, do you know off the top of your head how long? We're talking decades, aren't we, rather than...
I don't know what you're talking about. I have no memory of the Steelers playing this weekend at all.
Well, now I can imagine. Historically poor, 41-10 loss. The Dolphins, well, they incredibly find themselves not only with their best performance and best win of the season, but find themselves on a 4-game winning streak in a 33-10 win over the, I don't know, unimaginably inconsistent Carolina Panthers. The Giants get an awkward but much needed 13-7 point win over a very disappointing Philadelphia Eagles team. The Patriots don't look now, but they're coming for you. 36-13 over an injury-hit Tennessee Titans. The Jaguars, well, we talked about inconsistency. Nothing is consistent as the fact the Jaguars seem to be consistently disappointing each and every week. Still no real spark from that young offense as they lose 21-14 to the Falcons. The Colts threw away a winning position to lose 38-31 against the Bucks. The Jets came back to win 21-14 against a pretty ordinary but still frisky Texans team. The Broncos battled hard to a 28-13 win over the Los Angeles Chargers. The 49ers were victors, 34 points out of them. Really good performance, I felt, from them on offense. 34-26 over equally a pretty good Minnesota Vikings team who probably have still got their sights on playoff football. Then in the game probably going in that looked the best fixture of the week, you saw the Packers win 36-28 over the LA Rams. The Ravens 16-10 in a turnover-strewn game over the Browns. And in a kind of forgettable primetime showing, the Washington football team did enough to overcome the Seattle Seahawks 17-15. So a number of good games, but I would say not a classic week of ties. I mean, for every really exciting game, there seemed to be a couple of duds or at least a couple of games where there just wasn't an awful lot of points going on the board. The Ravens tie would be one. The Seahawks, probably unsurprisingly, another. The Jags and Falcons didn't do too much. But anyway, I've recapped all the scores. JB, give us your high watermark. Out of the fixtures that I've just run through, who was your performance of the week from?
See, it's an interesting question because I think you're right in calling out that it was not necessarily a week of amazing standout performances. The vast majority of games were decided by at least one score. And there were, I think, a few more blowouts in here than we were really expecting. So I was looking at this and thinking about it, and it's not necessarily that I have a performance of the week. It's more that I have my most impressive victory of the week. And my most impressive victory of the week goes to the New York Jets, because I think that was the game that I was really the most interested in seeing the outcome. And it's really weird to say that for a game that was the 2-8 Jets against the 2-8 Texans. But I was watching that looking for a sign of hope. Because you've got Zach Wilson back in the lineup again, back in at starting quarterback. You've got a Texans team who had a really nice win the week before. And you're just watching it thinking, okay, boys, show me something that suggests you're all going to be here this time next year. Show me something that makes me think you aren't just going to be this same team week after week. You're not going to be this same team season after season. Don't be the Lions. Be what we have seen as an example from someone like the Browns or even the Bengals. Show me that there is something here. There is a spark here that is potentially going to light the fuse. And I think we saw a little bit of that. I thought the Jets' performance was actually really interesting to see. The Jets teams previously have had that kind of never give up thing. It was predominant, especially in those like late era Rex Ryan teams, where they really, really they loved playing for Rex Ryan. They would do absolutely anything to not let their coach down. They weren't particularly good teams, but they were teams that went out and tried. And I think as the Jets have kind of been on a bit of the decline, there's been those questions about Salah. Like everybody talked before the season about what a great leader he was, what a great role model he was for the team. And then you're talking about, well, maybe that just doesn't translate. I didn't see that at the weekend. I saw a team and I saw a coach on the sideline that were absolutely loving the game that they were playing. They were having an absolutely brilliant time, and they were really showing that, yeah, you know what, we might not be the best, but you know what, we're not the worst either. And I still thought it was a respectable performance by the Texans as well. We've talked about Tyrod Taylor and how he's not necessarily, he's not an elite level quarterback, but he will win you games if you put him in the position to give him the opportunity to. So I think the Texans were frisky, the Jets were good. And it was just a nice kind of, it was just nice, really.
You know, Jets fans occasionally deserve nice things, and I'm with you. I mean, there was a lot of bodies on the line, a lot of energy. You kind of feel if the Jets stay in a game for long enough and it doesn't kind of leave them behind, if they don't find themselves down multiple scores, you know, they do work hard and they do play really, really physical football. I'm going to, you know, not say good football all the time, but they do play really physically for their head coach. They kind of built somewhat in Salah's image. I can see that point. The Texans, I think, a bit like you, I don't think they're the worst team in the NFL by any means. And you know, we probably could have expected them to be with the turmoil they had in the offseason. I think the hope for New York is that maybe Wilson is the guy. Maybe some of those young players are going to be able to step up, you know, and with the kind of draft capital they've got and with a really strong long-term vision from Salah, maybe this could be a turning point for not just their season, but for the franchise. A little footnote though on the Texans. I think David Tully's got them pretty organised. You know, I mean, they are absolutely devoid of talent. David Johnson at running back gives you something, but not really huge amounts. Particularly when, you know, you've got a situation there where they haven't got the best quarterback. I mean, Tyrod Taylor is okay, but I'd probably say there are 25 better starting quarterbacks in the NFL than him. And again, Brandon Cooks, I mean, he had that great play, you know, that bomb that he caught at the weekend. But I mean, outside of that, I mean, is there enough real talent on that roster to think that they could have ever been any better than this? I think the really good news for the Texans this year is that the drama has stopped somewhat. I think David Tully has got them, you know, focusing on matters on the field, thinking about, you know, the way that they can work themselves out of a problem that means they haven't got huge draft picks. Not only did they not have them last year, they haven't got them next year either, minus, you know, maybe a blockbuster trade on the horizon for Deshaun Watson. But yeah, I just feel like you're right, that there are teams that are probably where they deserve to be based on the talent on those rosters. But I think they've got two head coaches who start to show a bit of a path. So if that's your performance of the week, I could go for the Bengals, and I will, you know, come back round to talk about Burrow and the Bengals in a few minutes. But I'm actually going to pick the Raiders. I think when you're on a 3-game losing streak, when you've gone from a dominant position in your division to watch the likes of the Chiefs overtake you, the likes of the Broncos and Chargers catch up, you know, there's a lot gone on in Las Vegas this year. I mean, it feels like longer ago in a weird way, but they've been through obviously all the turmoil they had with the change at head coach. They've had issues with certain discretions amongst the playing personnel. But do you know what? They still have enough talent on that roster to give anybody a game. And they are playing really, really hard. Really, really well, actually, was my impression against the Cowboys. I think the weird thing is that the Cowboys have now lost at home to both the Raiders and the Broncos from that division. But those Cowboys performances were very different. You know, against the Broncos, you felt it was just one of those days. You know, it really didn't go right. Whereas against the Raiders, I don't really come out thinking much less of the Cowboys. You know, I think, you know, another night, a few things go their way. They maybe don't fall behind early as they did, you know, and they come out on top in this one. But actually, it was great to see the Cowboys and Raiders actually both play well, and maybe even more interesting to see the Raiders edge that one by 3 points. You kind of wonder where their ceiling is now and whether Carr and Co can, you know, use this as a springboard. I mean, you know, we talk about the Jets turning things around. That turnaround isn't going to see them playing playoff football, whereas the Raiders with that win put themselves absolutely right back in the mix.
I think turmoil is a good way to summarize what that team has been going through. And yes, everything with their departed head coach, everything that has gone through with multiple players who have had issues off the field that have then had them dismissed from the team. And it's important, I think, that we call out those things and recognize that those were individuals placed who made individual decisions that caused all of that. And you can't punish the team, the players that are there now for what those people did. But at the same time, it is like an anchor. It will absolutely weigh on you, and it will, like we have seen better teams and we have seen better people been sort of torn down by things like this around them than the Raiders. So it is good to see kind of that Raiders team fight back, because that is essentially, I think, what we can best describe that overtime win as. It was a fight between two good teams. And like, I think your summary there is spot on. Ultimately, some of the bounces went the Raiders' way. They capitalized on some mistakes, maybe a little bit more, that, you know, if you played that game 10 times, I think like the Cowboys would win 5 and the Raiders would win 5. It was just on that particular, I would say any given Sunday, and that particular Thanksgiving Thursday, the Raiders were the team that came away with it. He said it's not a loss that I think makes the Cowboys look weaker or anything less impressive. It's just, oh, well, you know what? This time they went out there and they couldn't quite do it. You know, missing CeeDee Lamb, I don't think helped, and they might be without him again this week from everything we're seeing at the moment. But it said it just adds a little bit of spice into that AFC West of, you know, who wants it, who's going to take it.
I think that's it. And I think the Raiders being in the mix is great for that new fan base. You know, when you relocate a team, you know, one of the things, I mean, it's odd because I think, you know, to an extent, the Raiders moving to Vegas almost become more of a tourist attraction than the type of team that you would necessarily imagine building a local loyal fan base. But then having said that, you've only got to watch their home games to see how much of the black hole have travelled from Oakland to come and support them. So look, I think the Raiders and those players are playing hard. And with the year they've had, you know, the players still in that locker room maybe deserve good things. Derek Carr, I kind of laughed off these suggestions that, you know, he was playing better and looked better in camp than he'd ever looked before, and he was playing freer and with more confidence. But actually, I think we have seen him do that in truth. I think he has got a higher ceiling based on what I've seen this season than maybe I would have thought. And I think a lot of people in that locker room realize that, you know what, they've got a really good chance here. You know, the Chiefs aren't quite on it. You know, they're in a good division, but it's a year with that one extra wild card spot. I was pleased to see the Raiders get the win. So if those are our performances of the week, let's change the lens ever so slightly. JB, what was your biggest surprise of the week? Team, player, scoreline, I don't mind. What stood out to you most? Biggest surprise of the week just gone?
I would tell you about my biggest standout of the week, but unfortunately we're going to have to take a pause on this because there's a flag on the play, especially in Thanksgiving and especially in that Raiders-Cowboys game. The amount of penalties that have been thrown, and just needless penalties as well, where you're watching the replays, you're seeing it. Sometimes you're even seeing it in like live as it happens, and you're just thinking, what? I do not understand what they think they see and what they think has happened. And the amount of, so het up by this, I can't get my words out. The amount of flags that got thrown for something that 5 minutes later didn't get flagged for. Consistency is what we ask for here. In terms of actual football, you're not gonna make me talk about the game in Cincinnati, Ohio. You're not. I'm not going to do it.
You don't have to do that.
I think it was the Rams Packers game, because obviously we said, you know, Packers 36, Rams 28 makes it seem like it was a good game. And I remember watching it, not really seeing that and not being particularly impressed by either team, which again is a weird thing to say in that kind of scoreline. I think the Rams, the kind of like explosive, exciting Rams that we've seen earlier in the season and that we have seen in seasons past, just didn't seem to be there. And I don't know if it's like an issue with Matthew Stafford. I don't know if it's an issue with something else that they're trying to do. But having seen like Sean McVay get so much more success from a quarterback that essentially he's got to diagnose the defense for him before the mic in the quarterback's ear cuts out, to getting a quarterback who is better at that, can read the defenses, can be more successful with an absolute cannon for an arm and not do something like that is really, really strange. Maybe it was just the Lambeau atmosphere. Maybe it was the cold weather because, they're a California team. But just watch that and kind of just thought, I think at the start of the season, or sort of in our off season rather, I unwittingly pinched your potential Super Bowl pick when I was thinking it's going to be a Los Angeles showdown in Los Angeles. And I do not see that happening after the Rams this week because the Packers are 9-3. I don't think they're impressive. Sorry, Packers fandom, Packers nation. I don't know what they call themselves. The Cheeseheads. Sorry, Cheeseheads. Please don't show up to podcast things with graters on your head for me.
That is the weird thing is the Rams, I don't think have looked dreadful in their losses. I don't think they've been the powerhouse we might have thought. What we've not seen yet is a team that looked like they've benefited from Von Miller or from Odell Beckham Jr. yet. And look, maybe there would have been a gaping hole left by it's Woods, isn't it, injured for them. Maybe without Beckham Jr. there would have been a hole and we would have said, they look a receiver short. But, for me, Cooper Kupp is the class of that receiving core, and even in a world where Odell Beckham Jr. lines up on the other side, it doesn't change my mind particularly. No. It is a weird one. One of the things that Phil has mentioned to us on previous podcasts and outside is he wonders if Sean McVay will be on the hot seat if they don't make the playoffs. And I don't think that. And the reason I don't think that is I don't think they're looking going, here you go, Sean, we've now given you all this talent, go and do something. I think they're bringing in this talent because they've got Sean McVay. They appreciate they've got one of the best coaches in the NFL, and they're thinking, let's stack this roster and give this guy a chance. The Matthew Stafford thing, I think, is going to work out for as okay as he has been. I think... Do you know, the weird thing is, for all you're saying, I think two things still remain true in my mind. I think they'll make the playoffs, and I think whoever they face in the playoffs, they'll give a good game. And so I'm not necessarily prepared to say they're not, still a Super Bowl pick or in that conversation. But yeah, you're right. It's kind of against the best teams. They've not really had it their own way this year, have they?
Well, I think just on your Sean McVay points, because there's a couple of things I go for there. I think you're absolutely correct in that Sean McVay will attract players to come and play for the Rams in the same way that, you always heard stories of Bill Belichick's pitch to bring free agents in for lower money. It was, okay, do you want to go and make X million in Cleveland and Tennessee, or do you want to come here and win Super Bowls with Tom Brady? Well, that's the simplest question in the world, really, if you want to be a successful footballer. And it's a lot of it's like the superstar coaches that you get in college football. Do you want to go to name escapes me, small town, small college America, or do you want to go and play for Nick Saban in Alabama or Jim Harbaugh in Michigan? Yeah. Or I was going to say Lincoln Riley in Oklahoma, but obviously that's all changed at the weekend. The other thing around Sean McVay, and I was thinking this last week when Phil made this kind of pitch, was a discussion that I'd have at times with Phil about the other kind of football. So just to give readers a little look behind the curtain, Phil is an Arsenal fan, and he would often, towards the end of Arsene Wenger's reign as manager, would express kind of frustration and think, okay, someone else needs to come in and do this. And my question was always, okay, who? Who are you going to go out and get that is better than Arsene Wenger? And yeah, obviously there was like your Jurgen Klopps and your Pep Guardiolas and everything like that. But it said, yes, but realistically, are you going to get them to leave like Barcelona, Bayern, etc., everywhere they've been, to get them to come to Arsenal? It's the same philosophy, I think, that the Rams have to be looking at here. If they get rid of Sean McVay inexplicably at the end of this season, who are they going to go and get that's better than Sean McVay? And I'm not saying Sean McVay is the greatest coach in the world or anything like that. I think Sean McVay is a very unique coach. He's got a very unique offensive mind that is going to be very, very difficult to replace. And that team is set up for that mind. Not sure if we're going to go on to talk about the 49ers or not, but I think one of the things we talked about with the 49ers at the weekend was they don't really have a superstar like at wide receiver or running back. They've got George Kittle, who is up there in the conversation for greatest tight ends. But what they have got is they've got a lot of, with the greatest of respect, role players, but role players in a Kyle Shanahan offense. Each of those players is there to do a very specific thing in a very specific offense. And the 49ers are having a tremendous amount of success historically with him because of that. It's the same kind of thing you get with Sean McVay. And it's going to be incredibly difficult to replace because the person that you bring in isn't going to be Sean McVay and isn't going to run that same offense. Because if you were going to bring someone new in to run Sean McVay's offense, why not keep Sean McVay?
Yeah, I mean, Sean McVay, if he ever was to lose that job, would be unemployed for less than an hour, you've got to imagine, right? And I'm not talking to go somewhere to be a coordinator either. I mean, I think he would be, absolutely coveted as a head coach, probably in the same way. I mean, I'm trying to think of probably Andy Reid when he left Philadelphia and then was immediately picked up by Kansas City. I mean, I think Sean McVay would probably be even more coveted, even more prized than that maybe. But I think let's move the conversation on, actually, because you just mentioned the 49ers, so let's do that. The 49ers really seem to have, found a groove over the last couple of weeks. I mean, as a Cardinals fan, I watched them play the Cardinals and kind of splutter, really. I know one of those games they didn't have Garoppolo and, there were certain things that weren't in their favor, but all of a sudden the production they're getting from Deebo Samuel, from Ayuk, they really do look like the kind of team that, I mean, they put up 34 points against the Vikings, who I think are a good team. I don't think they're a great team, but I think they're a good team. And, and the 34 points that they put up against the Vikings says to me that, on their day, and I mean, there's an awful lot of the NFL who are currently in this bracket, on their day, the 49ers have the ability to beat anybody. And I think we could see a team in the Super Bowl that has that kind of ability. We could see a team that scrapes into the playoffs, I was about to say 9-7, but we've got an extra game this year, haven't we? So what should we make that? 10-7, 9-8, something in that realm, scraping in. But they have these types of players on offense and defense. And, on defense, you look at the likes of Bosa, who, on his day is almost unplayable. I mean, you look at teams like the 49ers and think, actually, if they can start to get it right now, who says they can't, be lifting the Lombardi in, 3 months' time, 2 months' time? I mean, I think there's a number of teams who are starting to find a groove at just the right time. Top of my list would be the San Francisco 49ers.
Well, I think it's an interesting point, because what I've done is, while you've just been doing that, I've scrolled back in our archive to week 3 when we were talking about our best and worst 0-2 and 2-0 teams. And kind of we sort of universally, you, Phil and Aldrin all selected the Broncos as your worst 2-0 team, and I picked the 49ers. And I think at the moment, as we're looking at now in week 12 coming into week 13, we all appear to have got those wrong, because the Broncos and the 49ers are both sat at 6-5 now, and both look like they're doing particularly well. They've kind of found the groove. And we'll call it out because Aldrin called out the Vikings as his best 0-2 team, which I think is obviously key, because obviously we're talking about a Vikings 49ers game where I think the Vikings are a good team with a solid quarterback. But I think one of the problems for them is one of the articles, I think, one of the articles that I was reading just before we started recording today was, with Dalvin Cook potentially out, were the Vikings going to let Kirk cook, which I think appears to be the new slogan anytime a running team has their running back go
Let
down.
their quarterback throw the ball.
Yeah, let him in the kitchen. The article that I came with a lot of comments related to Kirk Cousins' ability in the kitchen and if he would be able to find the spices, etc., etc. That's the concern that I would have, is that we know that Kirk Cousins' great success comes from a solid running game, because his best skills are running play action and recognizing when it's time to run, when it's time to pass, that kind of like almost that like run pass option kind of thing. Like Alexander Mattison is a very good running back, but he's not Dalvin Cook, and Dalvin Cook is a player that we on the podcast are all a fan of. So that will be interesting to see. But I think the 49ers potentially have found their groove at just kind of the right time. Because, again, to pull out another kind of cliche, it's not about how you start, it's about how you finish.
Yeah,
and if the 49ers are hitting that groove at just the right time to start a march forwards, that'll be interesting again when we get to playoff time.
Yeah. I mean, if I take, so if we've moved on to the 49ers talking about kind of surprises of the week, let's give one more. Talking about sporting cliches, a game of two halves, and I'm going to pick out the Indianapolis Colts against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Now, what I'm about to say in, I suppose, criticism of the Colts, or what might initially sound like criticism, has to first be, explain that I'm doing this against the backdrop of the fact that they are playing against the reigning Super Bowl champions and the greatest quarterback to have ever played the game of football in Tom Brady. However, the Indianapolis Colts are on a great run going into this weekend, and I think at a certain point in the second half, did they have a 10-point lead in the ball or something like that? And you and I were sat watching this game together at the time, and there was a kind of update from the pitch side reporter on the telecast of that game, who basically introduced this whole thing around Frank Reich really trusting his players and really believing in them and just letting them go out and play. And as much as that was a lovely thing to hear, as your side are coming out of the locker room for a second half where they're basically, they've edged it, or maybe more than that, maybe even outplayed the reigning world champions. I think that what we saw after that was the evidence of how that type of approach with a team like Indianapolis is still fundamentally flawed, and how it may always be, because Carson Wentz seems to have these moments, in a game where one of the things that was absolutely in their favor is that they turned over the ball without being turned over themselves. They turned over the ball twice, trying to be too aggressive, and actually just making bizarre decisions. I appreciate you're 10 points up, you're driving down the field and you want to put that game to bed. But ultimately what they did in that second half let the Bucs back in. And the reason I want to bring that up in contrast to the 49ers is, do you know what? If the Colts have learnt that lesson, if this is one of those America's games moments where they go on to win the Super Bowl and the players talk about, the moment we really realized what we needed to do to be a great team was when we got turned over by the Bucs in that second half. Maybe I'd even put the Colts in that bracket. Now, the Colts are helped in a way the 49ers aren't by the fact that in that division with the problems the Titans have got, you can imagine the Colts making the playoffs, even if they splutter towards the end of the season. The Colts should find themselves playing meaningful football in January. But do you know what? Even in that defeat, like I said, I know it sounded like I started off criticizing them. Maybe I was. Even in that defeat, I would put the Colts in a similar bracket to the 49ers, in that I think those teams that have started the year well need to be wary of them. By the time we get around to playoff football in a few weeks, they're the teams who, on their day, they're a threat.
Again, just to go back to our discussion on best and worst 0-2 and 2-0, you and Phil all singled out the Colts as our best 0-2 team, and I think that is still a valid point to stick with. Yeah. I think both the Titans, because we mentioned them a little bit, and the Colts have got a benefit this week, because I think the Colts have got the Texans and the Titans have got a bye week. And I think the Texans, for as much as like, did sort of talk them up as a feisty team, I still think they are a team that like a team like the Colts are going to look at and think, okay, this is our opportunity to get right. This is our opportunity to just get back to Frank Reich Colts football. And Frank Reich Colts football should be have some Jonathan Taylor, have some Jonathan Taylor, have some Jonathan Taylor. And just in case you're still a bit hungry, we have some more Jonathan Taylor for you, because that guy is explosive. That guy is incredible. That guy is the guy that you want your forefront of the offense to be. And it was a point that they made in the commentary of the game that I think I used as a kind of a point to you on Sunday. So apologies, you've heard this before, but our listeners haven't. And again, it was
listen up.
It was a reference to the Jim Plunkett appearance in the Americas game for the 1980 Raiders.
Yeah.
And he talked about having come in as a first round pick, I think Heisman winning quarterback for the Patriots, and bombing out. And he bombed out because he put all of the expectation for everything on his shoulders. He had to be the one to lead the team. He had to be the one to carry the team at a point when the Patriots were definitely not the Patriots that we have now.
Yeah.
So he went to the Raiders, and Al Davis, legend that he is for this kind of thing, just said, you're just here to be the backup quarterback. Don't worry about anything else. You just worry about being the backup quarterback, because that's all I want you to be. And then when their starting quarterback, whose name absolutely escaped me right now, I want to say Phil Pastorini, but I don't think that's right. When he went down injured, Jim Plunkett came in as a starter. And again, all Al Davis said was, you're just being the quarterback. That's all you need to be. Just be the quarterback. Do what you need to do. Don't worry about what everybody else is doing. And they were talking in the game about how that's what Frank Reich was trying to get into Carson Wentz. You don't need to win this game yourself. You don't need to do everything. And that's not just a Carson Wentz problem. I think that's an Indianapolis Colts quarterback problem after Peyton Manning. Because I've maintained one of my favorite memories is that Colts Chiefs playoff game in 2013 where they fumble the ball on the goal line and Andrew Luck picks it up and just dives over the goal line with the ball extended like Superman. And you see that motivational poster meme that people produce where it said, luck, sometimes it's all you need, referencing that he was just dragging that rather poor team along with him. Carson Wentz doesn't need to do that now. And they got away from that against the Bucs. And that is part of the reason why I think they ended up losing that game. The other part of it is, just not to make this all about the Colts, the fact that the Buccaneers are a really, really good team with a lot of really, really good players and a lot of smart players who recognized what they needed to do. And they've got good minds like Bruce Arians and Todd Bowles who recognized where the strength of the Colts has been the last couple of weeks and said, it's the run. We've got really good players against the run. Maybe we should stop them doing that.
Yeah, the only thing on that, though, I mean, you're right. I think, you look at that front against the run, and also Todd Bowles. I mean, through his whole career, he's built defenses that have been great against the run from his time in Arizona and in New York and so on. But, I mean, they didn't quite bottle him up. I guess the point isn't really a Bucs point I'm making. I think any team in the playoffs that absolutely want to take care of the Indianapolis Colts will need to bottle up Taylor. And I don't think there are many teams in the NFL who are set up to do that. I mean, he does feel like a real difference maker and maybe even the best running back in a league admittedly without Henry and McCaffrey at the moment. Do you know what I do? I think the Colts, even in defeat, should feel pretty bullish about where this year might take them, particularly on the AFC side.
We have used the phrase, or I think especially have used the phrase, any given Sunday quite a bit the last couple of podcasts that we've done. And I think this is an any given season in that, like we keep asking, like I keep asking the question every week, who's good? Who's good at kicking? Because every week it seems to alternate, and not just every week, kick to kick, it seems to alternate as to who's good and who's bad. And maybe it's not who's good and who's bad. Maybe this is just a question of, okay, on this given Sunday, which team is going to win? And I think you're right in calling out the Colts, but I think there are a lot of players that, like we talked about the sort of 49ers, we talked about the Rams, all of it is in terms of when we get to the playoffs, based on current form and recognizing that we've still got a long way to go before we get there. So anything can and will change. But based on form currently, I would have absolutely no idea who I would be picking to win whatever games we've got in front of us, because at the moment it could be it's anybody's game. And I think deep down the cynical NFL fan will always summarize the season. It's a game of 16, 17 games now, with playoffs in January, and at the end of everything, the Patriots win the Super Bowl. And even then, I'm looking at that now and thinking, well, you know what? That could happen. Yeah. Just as easily it could be the Ravens. I hope it's not. It could be the Titans. It could be the Chiefs. It could be the Cardinals. Let's hope that actually happens.
That would be great.
Could be the Bucks again.
Could be the Packers.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's one of those, isn't it? I think for as much as I think we've wrapped up and highlighted the big winners and the big movers and shakers, before we round out our inaugural, I'm still not good with that, inaugural recap show, honourable mentions are deserved to the Bills putting up 31 points and really taking care of the Saints. The Bengals, I know we have, swerved that game for somewhat emotional reasons with them putting up 41 points.
But just, it was Steelers. We can't deny what a performance that was for the Bengals. Being completely fair and taking the emotion out of it. After a couple of shaky weeks, it was a game that the Bengals needed to come out and stamp their authority on it. And they stamped the Steelers into the field. And it's just I'm shuddering while I'm saying it because I don't want it to be true. But ultimately, it is. They
were great, the Bengals. And I mean, the other two honourable mentions, Dolphins, 33 points. I mean, the Panthers are, who are the Panthers at the moment? But 33 points in a win over the Panthers. And the Patriots, I mean, we talked about them on the last pod last week for good reason. Look at that, 36 points to 13 and never really in doubt either, was it, against Tennessee? So honourable mentions there. But JB, there's only two of us this week. Hopefully this time next week, there'll be four of us having to do this. We're going to end our recap show by picking who is red hot, top of the crop. Who is, for your money, the best team in NFL football as of, what are we, week 12, 2021? Who is the best team in the NFL?
I am pausing here because I am steeling myself to say words that I really do not want to say. The best team in the National Football League today is the New England Patriots, isn't it?
So Rick, play us out. What do you think of the New England Patriots?
Get ready! We are on tour, and we're doing it better than anybody else alive! You're talking to the Rolex Alligator Dog! Woo!
This is amazing! Woo!
Remember to subscribe and be cool. Tell your friends.